Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video from me, Pickles Parker Reviews. Now, I felt as if this video was a video I needed to make. It's a video on the Doctor Who fandom, and I feel like it's a video that's kind of long overdue, and ultimately I feel as if I just wanted to have a say on this, because anyone who has been listening to a lot of the podcasts I've been doing would know that on there, I wouldn't say frequently, but I have spoken about my thoughts on the Doctor Who fandom and the toxicity, I suppose, in the Doctor Who fandom. I don't particularly tend to talk about or do like dedicated videos on it, mainly because I don't always feel as if I'm the best person to talk about it, and as well, you know, you can often get hate from, you know, all sides of you know, the fandom if you make certain videos on this, and it's certainly why I've often been rather hesitant to touch on it, I suppose. But I thought I'd, you know, make a video of this, mainly because of the Who Addicts and what happened to them, and also my friend Farry's made a video on it and it banged, so, you know, I thought I'd make a video. No, I sound awful. But no, I thought I'd make a video on the Doctor Who fandom because I feel like it's really reached a stage of toxicity again. After lockdown brought it together, I feel like we are getting to another stage of toxicity in the Doctor Who fandom. And it is disappointing to see, especially as someone who hasn't immensely dealt with either side of the fandom personally. In terms of that toxicity, it is really sad to see other people constantly, you know, getting this toxicity thrown at them, and it is a shame. And I thought I'd speak about this. Farrell, as I mentioned before, did a video on toxic positivity, and I think that's a particularly interesting topic to speak about because it's not something that really gets spoken upon much. It's mainly, you know, the NMDs who get spoken about quite rightfully. And I spoke about in my podcast with Joe Brennan about how, I wouldn't say I feel sympathy for the NMDs, but what I'm saying is that it is very easy to fall into that mindset of hating everything and, you know, putting all these political agendas in and aligning with these certain people. It's very easy to fall down the rabbit hole. I mentioned in that podcast that I almost did a couple of years ago, and thankfully, you know, I never went truly down there. But ultimately, when you dislike something and everything comes out, you seem to dislike. A lot of the time, it's very easy to see a correlation between that because all media is becoming more diverse. So ultimately, you can use that excuse if you don't like anything and say, oh, it's because of this diversity here, here, and here. So it's very easy to kind of get a one-size-fits-all answer if you're really looking for that, and to have like a moment where it's like, oh, it all makes sense. I really do hate women. You know, that kind of thing, that it's all these women in film and TV because all my programs aren't doing great at the moment. Coincidence, they're all getting more diverse. It must be this, and, you know, realistically it isn't. It's purely a coincidence. But, you know, I can understand how some people fall down the rabbit hole and end up believing this mindset. Also, I understand how people, you know, join the NMDs because ultimately you want to feel validated. That's why channels like Bolstrek and Nerdrotic and TARDISON have, you know, done so well, is ultimately because people want to feel validated about their opinion, and often these people are, you know, the most extreme. And if you really don't like something, you can get a sort of catharsis, I suppose, out of listening to these people. And, you know, I do understand how you do fall down the rabbit hole, but ultimately, you know, that doesn't make it right. I think these people are some of the worst in the fandom, the NMDs, you know, just constantly spreading negativity and hateful stuff towards people, and ultimately that negativity isn't needed. You know, like something, dislike something, I don't care. There's no reason for you to be so negative about it. And negative isn't just in terms of being negative about the show. I mean negative in terms of being hateful towards individuals. You know, whether you like the show or you don't like the show, there's no need to be like name calling and calling you know, people certain stuff and having a go at them, essentially being really vile. I've seen some real vile stuff in my time while I've been on Twitter especially, which just isn't on. The spotlight is usually on the NMDs, whether it's them constantly commenting in comment sections of unrelated posts about how much they hate Doctor Who, you know, lying about Doctor Who making up false rumours in their videos. You know, it goes on just trying to spread hate and negativity. But also, as Farah's mentioned in his video, there's ultimately a small section of the Doctor Who fandom who are, you know, like the NMDs, but on the flip side, who will literally spread hate through the ruse of positivity, if that makes any sense. So essentially, they'll spread really hateful stuff, you know, saying vile things to certain creators who have criticism, very valid criticisms of the current era, but through the lens of, well, you don't like it, so you're this, and then just be absolutely horrible to them. And ultimately, I feel like this issue doesn't get spoken about enough, mainly because most people who criticise the NMDs vocally, and because I don't like the NMDs, are spoken about on the podcast, but I wouldn't say I'm a massively vocal critic of them, because I just usually like to, you know, stay out of that. You know, people such as Mr. TARDIS, you know, Tom Vance, are very vocal critics of the NMDs, quite rightfully, but ultimately I feel like those people don't really end up seeing the toxic positive side of the Doctor Who fandom, mainly because they are fairly positive about the show, in terms of like the current show, in terms of like Jodie Whittaker's stuff. So that they're not going to deal with the toxic positive side. Mr. TARDIS went on a live stream with the Who Addicts ages ago now, months ago now, and essentially they were describing the hate that they got for disliking it, and Mr. TARDIS almost couldn't really understand it, because in his mind, if you were being hateful, sure, you'd get more clicks, because that's what he's seen with, you know, the NMDs and all this sorts of stuff, so it didn't really make sense to him. I'm not critiquing Mr. TARDIS in any way, I just wanted to use that as an example of these sorts of people don't really deal with toxic positivity, because they don't really have, I wouldn't say they don't have criticisms of the current show, because I know Mr. TARDIS especially certainly does, but ultimately they're not being so critical of it that they're going to deal with people really being hateful towards them. So I feel like the toxic positive side is often hidden in that sense, and you know, I feel like you only really deal with these sorts of people individually. I don't feel as if obviously people don't call them out, and because I don't have a very big viewership base, you know, I don't really deal with these people, so ultimately I haven't had too much of a personal experience with these people, or the NMDs, to be fair. So ultimately I'm not really talking about experience, I'm more talking about experience in terms of what I've seen on Twitter, rather than it being directed at myself, I suppose. But yeah, I feel like this issue of toxic positivity isn't really spoken about much, purely because a lot of creators don't have to deal with it, but unfortunately the creators who do have to deal with it get it the worst. You know, Who Addicts, creators that I've loved for years, some of the first Doctor YouTubers I ever actually, you know, sat down and watched, I've now stopped talking about current era Doctor Who, purely because they are getting such hate from people purely for their criticisms, which is just wrong. It's absolutely wrong. Not only because there's many creators criticising the show, so why the Who Addicts of all people are just getting all this backlash is beyond me, and all this offensive stuff, which is just not on. But yeah, it's also ridiculous, and to still see tweets of people claiming, do people actually ever really hate on you for disliking Jodie Whittaker? Yes they do. I'm not saying that in an NND sense. The Who Addicts aren't not my doctors. They dislike the Jodie Whittaker era through valid criticism, like myself. So ultimately, to be, you know, getting this backlash, and to still see people denying that there is a toxic positive side in the fandom is just kind of ridiculous to me. And yeah, it is an issue that needs to be raised. I feel like Farah's did an amazing video on that and brought it to people's attention. As I said jokingly at the start of this video, that video he did banged, and I'm thankful for that, because ultimately it's getting that awareness out there, it's getting people aware of that factor, and I'm so glad of the support that he's gotten for that video, because the toxic positivity is an issue that I feel like really needs to be raised in the fandom. Ultimately, the fandom is a very toxic place at the moment. I feel like there is a semblance of you know, coming together in the fandom that happened over the last year due to lockdown, but it can't be ignored, the toxicity that's still in there. Ultimately, I've had pretty good experiences with the Doctor Who fandom recently, I suppose, in terms of I've made great friends recently through the Doctor Who fandom. You know, Farah's being one of them, but loads of different people who I'm very good friends with now, and I would consider them quite good friends actually. Doctor Who YouTubers, different people who I interact with quite a lot. You know, that's all come down through Doctor Who and the Doctor Who community, so I couldn't be thankful enough for that. So ultimately, at its best, the Doctor Who fandom can be really good. We saw that in the watch-alongs. We saw that, for example, in Ace Creeper's Christmas live stream, where he raised so much money for charity, a ridiculous amount. That's the best of the Doctor Who fandom. But I feel that often the Doctor Who fandom really does, you know, drift out. I think it's a small percentage of people on either side, in inverted commas. There aren't two sides. You know, there's multiple different people. There isn't two sides. But in terms of like the toxic side, I suppose, to put it in broad strokes, there's the NMDs and toxic positivity. And these two sides are both awful. And I think that these two sides either need to leave the fandom or ultimately be silenced, or just reform and you know, change their ways. Because ultimately sometimes you're not a bad person if you make these horrible things. You're just confused. You know, I've made some comments a couple of years ago. I mentioned this in the Joe Prenham podcast I did, but I made some comments which ultimately and phrased them in a certain way that ultimately I'm not proud of, and I didn't really stand by those values, but it was just ultimately how I phrased it, and ultimately I've learned from that and improved, and ultimately I'd never do anything like that again. So ultimately I feel like some of these people could change. Maybe they're just a bit confused, because ultimately, like I said with the NMDs, you want to, you know, get catharsis, you want to have a viewpoint that's similar to yours. Sometimes if you like something so much, it can feel offensive if someone dislikes that. So I can not necessarily understand, but I can see why some people feel this way about people who critique Jodie Whittaker's era. But ultimately it's about being a grown-up. It's about recognising that while you may like something, there is valid criticism for it, that, you know, you need to say, hey, I don't agree with you, but, you know, I can see where you're coming from, or say, hey, I don't agree with you, but, you know, that's fine, because ultimately we all disagree and agree on certain things. I don't think there really needs to be that toxic side with anything, whether you dislike the show, whether you like the show, doesn't matter. There's no need for this toxicity that needs to be banded around. People have been making these videos on this topic for ages now, and unfortunately things don't really seem to be changing, and I feel like it's a topic that a lot of people like to ignore. They like to ignore that the fandom is ultimately quite toxic, especially on the toxic positivity. And ultimately for a while I was starting to maybe think that toxic positivity isn't even a thing anymore. But I do feel like it is starting to come back in unfortunate ways, and the Who Addicts and what they've unfortunately had to deal with has only really illustrated that. Yeah, it's unfortunate and it really needs to stop. Ultimately, I haven't dealt with stuff too personally myself in terms of this, either NMDs or toxic positivity. It all needs to stop. The fandom should be a very happy place, and when people are scared to open up on their opinions, I feel like that is a real shame. It's a real shame that the Who Addicts can't, unfortunately, express their opinions on certain things in fear of backlash. That shouldn't be how it is, guys. That shouldn't be how it is. We should all be able to express our opinions, unless they are outwardly hateful, like some of the NMD's opinions are, but usually those aren't strictly Doctor Who opinions. That's when you know, bring in political agendas and all that sort of stuff, which I'm not going to touch on. But yeah, ultimately, you know, people just need to accept other people's opinions, and while you may not agree with them, you know, just say, hey, that's your opinion, guys. You don't need to attack them. You know, if you disagree, you can say you disagree and maybe, you know, why you disagree with it, but ultimately there's no need to be hateful for it, you know, whether that's, you know, on both sides of the spectrum. So there you go, that's my kind of little rant, I suppose, in inverted commas, about the Doctor Who fandom. I know this video was particularly unstructured, but yeah, I just wanted to, you know, get my thoughts out about this. You know, I feel like it's a very pressing issue, and yeah, it does unfortunately need to stop. I did joke that the reason I'm doing this video is purely because Farry's video got clicks, and, you know, maybe there's a small part of it because of that, I'm not going to lie, but I was actually contemplating making this video because the Doctor Who fandom is disgusting at times, but also brilliant at times. I just feel that sometimes, you know, the toxic side of it, it does just get a bit too much, and it just generally end up affecting people's mental health massively. So ultimately, you know, that's just not right, guys. You know, that all needs to stop. The Doctor Who fandom should be a happy place, and I feel like we should really all put in an effort to try and be as respectful as possible. But yeah, that's this video. I hope you enjoyed it, listening to my waffly thoughts about the Doctor Who fandom. Yeah, as I said, it's just a video that I felt like I needed I needed to make, and yeah, I look forward or not look forward to the response to this video depending on how it goes. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoy this video, leave a like and drop a sub if you want to hear more content from me. I don't know why you would, but if you do, drop a sub, and yeah, hit that notification bell to stay notified for all these latest videos. Sorry about the constant audio format. The reason I've been doing this, and rather than like facecam, like filming me kind of videos, just because they're easier to make, and ultimately the video files are smaller and take less time to render and upload. So if I really want to get a video out on time, like a news video for example, then it needs to be audio. Sorry about the lack of face cam. Here's a picture of me on screen. Yeah, look how cool I am. Oh, I wish. But yeah, sorry. There will be more face cam videos coming in the future, including a Revolution of the Daleks in-depth review. I am going to rewatch Revolution of the Daleks and give a more in-depth review than my initial thoughts. So, you know, that's coming hopefully at the end of this week. So if anyone cares about that, there it is. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening to my thoughts. And of course, a goodbye.